when one talks of Bhutan, you find that two factors instantly emanate. One is that Bhutan has a very fiercely protected environment. That's why we call it the last Shangri-La. Secondly, what is most specific to Bhutan is that Bhutan defies the democratic transition in Bhutan defies explanation by current political theory. What I'm trying to say is that when Bhutan transitioned to a democracy, it did not follow a usual pattern of transition, which generally, countries follow. Okay. Now, elections were not triggered by any grassroots upsurge for political change or representative government. Democracy in Bhutan came as a top-down gift by the king to the people of Bhutan. So that's why we say that Bhutan basically transitioned to a democracy in a very unique way. Thirdly, what is most specific to Bhutan is that Bhutan follows a very unique model of democracy, and that is a gross national happiness model. So as you can see in the slide, you have what I've pointed out is the distinctiveness of Bhutanese democracy. Please move on to the next slide. And here you can see that Bhutan has attempted to put forth a very unique version of democracy that is gross national happiness. Gross national happiness in Bhutan is a kind of a middle path, a kind of a harmony between economic development, between culture, between environmental preservation, and between socio-economic development. So gross national happiness for Bhutan is not mere rhetoric. It is a kind of a middle path. It is a kind of a harmony that the people of Bhutan live by. In fact, the Planning Commission in Bhutan has also been renamed as the Gross National Happiness Commission. Okay, can we move on to the next slide, please? Can we move on to the next slide, please?
Ma'am, just a second.
Yeah. So if we kind of move on to the geographical significance of Bhutan, you see Bhutan is very strategically located. We know that. Please move on to the next slide. Yeah, okay, just keep it there, please. So you see Bhutan is very strategically located, as we know. It is an important buffer state between India and China. And we also know that it shares borders with 4 Indian states. We have Assam, we have Arunachal Pradesh, we have West Bengal, we have Sikkim. That is why, Bhutan is important for both China as well as India. Now, before proceeding further, let me just give you a historical perspective on Bhutan. You see, Bhutan existed initially as a patchwork of warring fiefdoms, and there were power struggles between the rival valleys of Paro and Trongsa, which led to a civil war in Bhutan. And these kind of turmoil and civil wars continued for about 300 years, till about 1907, when Ugyen Wangchuk, the first hereditary king of Bhutan, actually unified the country. There were border skirmishes with the British India, and this also continued till the time Bhutan signed a treaty of Punakha with British India. Now, according to this treaty of Punakha in 1910, Bhutan did give up some territory to British India, and it became a British protectorate. Bhutan was never colonized, but it was a protectorate. Now, in case somebody or some of our students do not know what a protectorate is, I can take it up later in the Q&A. But anyway, I can even tell you now. You see, when you talk of a protectorate, basically it means it is a dependent territory that has been granted local autonomy. It is under the, a state controlled by another state. It gets its autonomy in internal matters, but it has to recognize the suzerainty of a powerful nation. In this case, Bhutan was under the protectorateship of British India. Now, you see what happened during this time, the invasion of Tibet by China and increasing Chinese incursions in Bhutan became the basis of Bhutan reaching out to India. And this is how a close relationship was nurtured with India. This was one way of enhancing its own territorial security and at the same time enhancing the prospects for socio-economic development. Now, based on this backdrop, Indo-Bhutan relations began to take on concrete form following state visits made by the third king, His Majesty Jigme Dorji Wangchuk, to India and Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru to Bhutan between 1954 and 1961. So, besides emphasizing India's recognition of Bhutan's independence and sovereignty in his statement in Paro, Nehru's visit in 1958 also initiated development cooperation between the two countries. The basic framework of India-Bhutan bilateral relations is the Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation of 1949 between the two countries. Now, we know that the India-Bhutan Treaty of 1949 stresses on perpetual peace and friendship, free trade, commerce, and equal justice to its citizens. The most important provision of this treaty is Article 2. Now, what does this Article 2 of the treaty say? That the government of India would undertake to exercise no interference in the internal administration of Bhutan. On its part, the government of Bhutan agrees to be guided by the advice of the government of India regarding its external relations and its foreign policy. So now, when this treaty was signed and Article 2 was implemented, this actually became a kind of a thorn between the relations of India and Bhutan. And that is why in 2007, this treaty was renegotiated. In 2007, this treaty was renegotiated and the current king, His Majesty Jigme Khesar Namgyal Wangchuk, in February 2007, entered into the renegotiated treaty in 2007. So this new treaty of 2007 has three important points, again, which talk about perpetual peace and friendship between Bhutan and India. They also say that they would, both the countries, that is Bhutan and India, shall cooperate closely with each other on national interests, and neither government shall allow the use of its territory for activities that are harmful to the national security and interest of each other. Most important part of this treaty is that the government of India agreed that the government of Bhutan would be free to import weapons from or through India into Bhutan, whatever arms, whatever ammunition, machinery, warlike material may be required for the welfare of Bhutan. But this arrangement shall hold good only if the government of India is satisfied that the intentions of the government of Bhutan are friendly and that there is no danger to India from such importations. Now, how did this treaty suit the Indian calculus? That is also important for us to know. You see, as I've already said, Bhutan is a buffer between India and China. And in 1958, when Jawaharlal Nehru visited Bhutan, he said that support for Bhutan's independence is important, and any aggression against Bhutan would be seen as an act of war against India. So that's how important Bhutan was to India, as was stressed by Nehru in 1948. Now, most importantly, this treaty also suited India because of a factor like the Siliguri Corridor. Now, what the Siliguri Corridor is, I will be explaining in another 4 to 5 minutes during the course of my presentation. But before that, let me tell you that the proper relations, diplomatic relations between India and Bhutan were established in 1968. And on May 14th, 1968, the embassy of India in Bhutan was inaugurated. Now, during this time, let me also tell you that Bhutan started to diversify its relations with other countries, and India supported Bhutan's application for United Nations membership in 1971. So that's how important Bhutan was for India, and India stood by Bhutan, even supporting its membership in the United Nations. Now, can we move on to the next slide, please? Now, you see, what I'm trying to do during the next 5 to 10 minutes is telling you about what are Bhutan's interests in India, what are India's interests in Bhutan, and how does a China factor actually come in. So when you talk about Bhutan's interests in India, you see, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are clearly audible.
You are audible.
Right. So when you talk about Bhutan's interest in India, most importantly is the geographical factor. You see, India lies to the south. That's why trade and transit routes become a natural choice for Bhutan in contrast to the glaciated regions of the north. If you see the economic factor, India has supported most of the 5-year plans of Bhutan, especially the first 2 5-year plans were completely supported by India. India has been extending financial assistance even to its 12th 5-year plan and has allotted 4,500 crores to Bhutan for its 12th 5-year plan. Now, there is free trade regime between both the countries. India is Bhutan's largest trading partner. Currently, the major items of export from Bhutan to India are electricity from the Tala, Chukha, and Kurichu hydropower electric projects. These are important projects under the government of India and the royal government of Bhutan. Besides, you also know that major items of export from Bhutan include wood products, chemicals, minerals, vegetable fat, metals, and so on. Major exports from India to Bhutan are petroleum products, mineral products, base metals, machinery, and so on and so forth. So Bhutan, in fact, is important because India is Bhutan's largest trading partner, accounts for 79% of Bhutan's total imports and 90% of its exports. The current ongoing hydropower projects are the Magadechu hydropower project. Then you have the Sankosi Reservoir project. So these 2 projects are the ongoing important projects that are there. Then you also have education and cultural cooperation between Bhutan and India. You know that the great Indian saint Padma Sambhava, or which Bhutanese or call as Guru Rinpoche, who came to Bhutan in 747 AD, was responsible also for bringing forth Buddhism to Bhutan. Now, besides that, there are lots of scholarships that are given to Bhutanese students. You have the Nehru Wangchuk Scholarship that was initiated by Dr. Manmohan Singh. You have a Shirapse College in Eastern Bhutan. And Shirapse College in Eastern Bhutan is affiliated to Delhi University also. And then, there is an important Nehru Wangchuk Cultural Center that was inaugurated in Thimphu in 2010. And since I happened to visit this center during my visit to Bhutan in 2013, I might as well add that this cultural center is not just housing libraries. It is also a fusion of Bhutanese music and Indian folklore, Indian traditional dances. And this is a kind of Nehru Wangchuk Cultural Center where you have musical evenings, you have literary festivals also in this Nehru Wangchuk Cultural Center. Besides, you have an India-Bhutan Foundation, which was inaugurated in August 2003, right? And under this India-Bhutan Foundation, a first ever seminar between India and Bhutan on gross national happiness was held in Thimphu in 2010. Besides this, some of us have heard also, there is a very important literary festival which Bhutan holds every year. It is called Mountain Echoes. And this also Indians do take part very, very enthusiastically. Besides this, I would also like to tell you one very important thing is that the two election commissions between India and Bhutan are very closely coordinating with each other. In fact, when Bhutan held its first elections in 2008, you find that before that only the Chief Election Commissioner Qureshi, as well as Chief Election Commissioner later on Naveen Chawla, also visited Bhutan in 2009, and the Election Commissioner of Bhutan also visited India. And you also find that Government of India provided a grant of nearly 47 million to Bhutan to source electronic voting machines from India. Election observers from India went to Bhutan to supervise the elections. So that's how close, in fact, the election commissions are between Bhutan and India. And you also find that the Bhutanese parliament also has been extending a lot of training programs in India that has been conducted by the Bureau of Parliamentary Studies in India. Now, besides that, Bhutan also, like India, is a member of BBIN, the SAARC, and other important, international forums. Now, another thing I would also like to tell you, and most importantly, where Bhutan's interests lie in India is the security element. Security for Bhutan is important right from the time China had actually annexed Tibet, and right from the time Chinese expansionist tendencies came known to Bhutan. In fact, the Chinese had nurtured a very ridiculous claim in 1960 when they said that Bhutanese, Sikkimese, and Ladakhis are a united family, and they must be subject to the great motherland of China, and they must be taught the communist doctrine. So that's how, security element is a very important element when we talk about, Bhutan's interests in India. In fact, can you please go on to the next slide? Now, if you see in this slide, there are disputed areas. And if you see in the north of Bhutan, there are two areas, Jakarlung and Pasamlung, with a very huge area, 495 square kilometers. To the left also, you have the Doklim Plateau, which is about 269 kilometers. So, what China is trying to do very smartly, in fact, in 1998 only, it offered an exchange deal to Bhutan, and it said that this disputed territory of Jakarlung and Pasamlung, you can have, and in return, you can give us the Doklim area. Now, let me tell you, Doklim is very, very important to India. Doklim provides access also to the Ha Valley, which lies to the northwest of Bhutan. Its rich pastoral land, in fact, supports the livelihoods of people and also happens to be the private property of the king. Now, why the Doklim Plateau is important, I would like to tell you is that, if you just go on to the next slide, please. Yeah. Now, you can see a small little area which I have put through the arrow, and you can see it as a Siliguri Corridor. Now, you see what happens is when you think about Doklim or the strategic importance of Doklim, you will find that China's Chumbi Valley lies to the north of Doklim and India's Siliguri Corridor lies to the south of Doklim. Both are strategic choke points that are critical in global power competition. The Chumbi Valley actually points to the Siliguri Corridor like a dagger. Now, why is the Siliguri Corridor so important? Siliguri Corridor is actually a narrow stretch of land, which is about 24 kilometers wide, which connects India's northeastern states to the rest of India. So, and many people call this Siliguri Corridor as chicken's neck. Now, what is China trying to do? China is trying, can you move on to the next slide, please? Now, China is trying to expand the narrow wedge of the Chumbi Valley by pumping in more forces. If you can see the Chumbi Valley in the slide, it's trying to pump in more forces in the Chumbi Valley and is trying to bring in military power so that if there are hostilities between India and China, it can cut off the northeast from the rest of India. That is why India is very much against the Doklim region being given to China by Bhutan. It does not want that kind of an exchange deal to happen. Now, can you revert to the other slides where you had the Chinese, India's interest in Bhutan, 3 slides before? Can you please, before this? Yeah, right. Yeah, please, this is the slide. Now, besides, India also has a couple of interests in Bhutan, as I've already said, about the strategic buffer, about Siliguri Corridor. And also there is something important which I need to tell you, and that is about the militant camps. You know, India seeks cooperation from Bhutan for combating insurgency. There is a spillover of insurgency from the southern borders of Assam and the northeastern states into Bhutan. There have been setting up of camps by the ULFA, by the National Democratic Front of Bodos, and the Kamatpuri Liberation Organization. Now, Bhutan rose to the occasion in 2003 when it launched Operation All Clear and Operation Flush Out against Indian insurgents taking shelter in its territory. In fact, the fourth king, King Jigme Singh Wangchuk himself was a part of this operation. Now, now before going on to the China factor, I would like to, tell you something that generally when one thinks of India-Bhutan, one thinks of a very cordial relationship, a very rosy, cozy relationship. But sometimes I would like to stress that Bhutan has been trying to assert itself politically on many instances. For instance, in 1975, with the merger of Sikkim with India, was not taken kindly by Bhutan. The royal government of Bhutan said it is a deep loss of cultural identity for Sikkim. In fact, whenever talks were held between China and Bhutan, which started in fact in post 1981, between 1981 and 1984, whenever there was a talk of demarcation of boundaries between Bhutan and China, Indian representatives were always there. In fact, 1984, Bhutan and China actually started boundary level talks for the first time. Okay, now during the NAM conference, the non-aligned conference in Havana, Bhutan government supported the Pol Pot regime, and India that time was totally against this particular move by Bhutan because India never supported the Pol Pot regime of Cambodia and the Khmer Rouge particularly. So in 1997 and 1998, we will be surprised to know that in the 12th and 13th round of boundary level talks, 2-3 things we noticed. Bhutan emphasized that in the course of time, they would have trade relations with China, they would have diplomatic relations with China, and exchange programs with China. In fact, in 2002, Bhutan government also supported China's claim on Taiwan, which is actually a deeply contested claim today. Bhutan actually, one cannot totally blame Bhutan for this because Bhutan has been trying to maintain politically correct relations with China. Let's not forget China is a very powerful neighbor, right? And Leo Rose, the British scholar, talked about Bhutan giving importance to China, establishing politically correct relations with China even way back in 1970s, right? Then in 2012 also, let me also tell you, at the Rio summit that was held, the Bhutanese Prime Minister Jigme Thinley, he tried to establish close relations with Bhutan and wanted to buy, buses only from Chinese manufacturers. So in fact, he had put forth that China is important for Bhutan. So that's how I would like to tell you that, China has also been a very noticeable factor in China-Bhutan relations. Of late, we also know that the tourist fees for Indians now, which earlier on there was no tourist fees whenever Indians used to visit Bhutan, but now every Indian has to pay 1,200 per day, per person. And this is a new development because Bhutan is very cautious of its environment, very cautious of its sustainable development. And in fact, there was a little problem also a few years back when Indian tourists started taking selfies on the Dochula Pass. And Dochula Pass happens to be a very sacred place for the Bhutanese. You have a lot of memories there of all those Bhutanese soldiers who died in the Operation Flush Out when trying to, flush out Indian insurgents. Now, so when you talk about the China factor in Bhutan's relation, as I've already discussed about the Chumbi Valley, I've discussed about the Siliguri Corridor. So what China has been trying to do is to gain control of the Doklim Plateau. Now, in 2017, the Doklim standoff that took place for nearly 73 days is an important landmark in the relations between China, Bhutan, and India. And what China was trying to do, China was actually trying to build, sorry.
So you can have water, please. You can take a break and have a water. Yeah, glass of water.
No, it's okay. What China was trying to do, China was trying to actually build a motorable road to Doklim, you see, and that road basically would help China, in fact, in trying to bring, all the military bases and all the machinery right up to the Chumbi Valley. So it was trying to construct a road right to the Doklim Plateau, which actually was not encouraged. And you also find that if you see the satellite images, you find that about 3,000 soldiers were stationed in the Doklim area. And you also find helipads, military outposts, all these were actually deported in the Doklim area. Now, once, the Indian soldiers intervened, a disengagement took place, the whole thing, did settle over a period of 73 days. But let's not forget that China did have its way in trying to build military outposts, helipads, deploying soldiers. And you also find the satellite images say the same thing, that there are reflections of Chinese deployment still in the Doklim Plateau, still in the Doklim area. Now, before I proceed further, let me also tell you that China also is trying to open diplomatic channels with Bhutan, because China is one country which does not have diplomatic relations with Bhutan, and that is important for China to have diplomatic relations with Bhutan. Then China thinks that because of its economic might, because of its military muscle, because it can influence Bhutan, because Bhutan is a fast-changing society with the youth constituting about 50% of the population. Bhutan is not a part of the BRI project, as we know. And I think China somewhere thinks that Bhutan is a peace-loving country. And there is also a certain amount of image building China wants to do, because China is always playing a double game. On one side, it wants to, annex territories, expansionist tendencies. And on the other, it also wants to show that it wants to side up with the peace-loving country like Bhutan. For instance, I would like to just take a minute or two on China's belligerent tendencies. You know, if you go back to 2015, China had constructed a village, Gyalafug, in Bhutan. Now, what they did was they brought workers from Tibet and China on Bhutan's northern border and connected the Beul region to the Layab region in Tibet through a 29-mile road, which was at a height of 15,700 feet. Bhutan also constructed buildings. It set up communication bases in Mabjathang area, which is very close, in fact, to the Khamjang Zong in Bhutan, which is a very sacred area of Bhutan. Now, what Tenzing Lamsing has to say, Tenzing Lamsing is the editor of the Bhutanese newspaper. He says, Bhutan has maintained a disciplined silence. And maybe because China is too big a power, Bhutan also is very cautious about how it, it outplays with China. In fact, according to some observers, China has also started cross-border settlement in the Menchuma Valley, and close to 50,000 households have been established there. Now, let me tell you, in 1998, China had signed a formal agreement with Bhutan respecting its sovereignty and territorial integrity, and also said no unilateral action will be taken to change the status quo on the border. But China's construction in the periphery of Bhutan is a violation of this treaty. So we cannot forget that China has a double game to play. Its multi-level expansionist tendencies are a big factor for Bhutan. Now, you would also be knowing of late, between May 2020 and November 2021, in fact, China has built a Pangda village in Doklim, Pangda, a Pangda village in Doklim, which actually has become a real cause of apprehension for India as well as Bhutan. Bhutan is also facing immense pressures, in fact, by China claiming, in fact, the Sakting wildlife sanctuary in Arunachal Pradesh also. Now, keeping all these factors in mind, let me tell you that Bhutan and China have had, 24 rounds of talks to settle their, boundaries. Negotiations have taken place. And this has been carrying on for last 37 years. The last boundary level talk, the second last boundary level talk took place in 2016. Thereafter, after 5 years, that is in October 2021, the latest boundary level talk took place. Why there was a gap of 5 years? Because of the Doklim standoff and because of the pandemic. Now, the last talk that was held in October 2021 is important because now it is believed that Bhutan and China have signed a memorandum of understanding, and it is a 3-step roadmap for expediting Bhutan-China boundary negotiation. But what it actually is, Bhutan and China have not spilled the beans. They are trying to keep a closed mouth over it. Gradually, it will come to light as to what it is. Let me also tell you, this has taken side by side, along with, we had a 15th Corps Commander level talks between India and China in March 2022 to finalize disengagement talks between India and China because of, what happened in Galwan region. Now, disengagement of troops between India and China has taken place in Pangong Tso Lake, in the northern and south banks of Pangong Tso Lake, in Galwan region. But there are some patrolling points where there are many troops, whether it is PP-17, whether it's patrolling point 15, whether it's 17A, and so on and so forth. Now, when we are talking about China, I have already mentioned what motives China has behind trying to establish close relations with Bhutan. Bhutan is also serving as a window for China to widen linkages with South Asian countries. Now, what are the irritants that we have in India-Bhutan relations? I would like to spend about 5 minutes. You see, there is, an Indian military training team that was established in 1962 after Nehru's visit. Now, this Indian military training team, the Eastern Command of the Indian Army and the Air Force have integrated Bhutan's defense into their role and responsibilities. IMTRAT is supposed to train and prepare Bhutanese security forces in the art of warfare and to brace itself for operational tasks. The Indian Army also helps with providing weapons, firepower to Bhutan. But you see, what actually is the problem is that Bhutan thinks that IMTRAT is indirectly a kind of intervention in Bhutan's sovereignty. Number one, because firstly, you find the IMTRAT headquarters are in Hazong. And what is Hazong? It is a monastery which is deeply worshipped, deeply sacred for Bhutan. That is one. Second, Bhutan also has assumed very great responsibilities because now they have their own Wongdi Royal Bhutan Army Training Center. So when they have their own Royal Bhutan Training Center, they feel that IMTRAT gradually should wean off. And there are about 2,000 army personnel in IMTRAT who are positioned there in Hazong, especially in the Ha area. Then the second irritant that you find in India-Bhutan relations is the factor of globalization. You see, I think no country can resist the temptation of globalization. And this is actually harming Bhutan's national identity, its cultural cohesion, because globalization has impacted the socio-cultural fabric of Bhutanese society, whether it is drug culture, whether it is violence, whether it is pressure on family bonds. And you also find that this is where China is going to step in, because Bhutan, in fact, is becoming an easy prey for China, because China, being economically a very strong country, China has a significant presence in the Bhutanese economy, right? And China, in fact, is now also trying to make inroads through its culture. In fact, you would find that, initially, about a couple of years back, the Bhutanese would speak very fluent Hindi and very fluent English. Now they've started speaking very fluent Chinese also. So this kind of incursion that you find of China, whether it is through economics, whether it's China, let's not forget that Bhutan's economy is a very Bhutan is a poor country with a great deal of unemployment index. So this is where China can help Bhutan. And one more thing I would also like to tell you, that the future might also see the diversification of Bhutan's hydropower-centric economy. You find that there are a lot of debts that have arisen because of loans that are being given for hydropower dams. And these loans account for nearly 86% of Bhutan's rupee debt burden. And what is India doing? India is getting surplus power from Bhutan at cheap rates. China happens to be also a very large producer of hydropower. So there are significant pressures are there to open out to China, which can affect relations with India. So whether it is Bhutan's high unemployment rate or whether it is national debt burden, this can give a necessary opening to China. Now, what India also wants to do, it also says that whatever boundary disputes are settled between China and Bhutan, it should be done through the prism of Sino-India relations. So this is actually another thorn that is also there between India and Bhutan relations. And let me also tell you that when I was just mentioning about, the two prime ministers of Bhutan and China getting close in 2012 for buying buses, India did not take kindly to this. And when the two prime ministers met on the sidelines of the Rio summit, what did India do? India withdrew all subsidies on cooking gas and kerosene. And there was a huge crisis in Bhutan that strained relations and bilateral ties between Bhutan and India. Now, besides that, sometimes I think India also goes overboard. For instance, during my visit to Bhutan also many years back, I noticed something very strange. We also know that Bhutan, being a very poor country, cannot manufacture, cannot, construct its roads. So the Indian Border Roads Organization has played a very important role under their project Dantak. Now, when I went to Bhutan, what I noticed, it was written there, Dantak welcomes you to Bhutan. So Dantak happens to be an Indian border road organization. So this was written on Paro's airport. And this, in fact, was not taken kindly by the Bhutanese population. And then Dantak also had put up road safety reflectors in various places in the colors of the Indian flag and not the Bhutanese flag. Okay, so these are factors I thought I'd share with you. Now, what are we, how do we move on from here? What is the way ahead? I think to sum up maybe in 2-3 minutes, I would like to say that, yeah, you can move on, please. The slides I just forgot. Yes, just keep it there. This is where I'm going to sum up my presentation. You see, what I would like to say is that India needs to change the terms of loans that it is giving to Bhutan. The tapping of hydropower potential has to be at rates that are acceptable to Bhutan. And it has to continue development aid at subsidized rates. Okay, so, and importantly, India has to keep out of the domestic politics of Bhutan. So, we also know that, India must also develop Eastern Bhutan so that, it does not become an insurgency hub, because many Ulfa militants enter that area, and this disturbs the peace and harmony of Bhutan also. Now, I think because India is a very mature democracy, it's a very, I won't say a totally functional democracy, but all said and done, India is a democracy. It has its smooth runs, it has its topsy-turvy rides. It can help Bhutan also to consolidate itself further. Bhutan is, of course, a 15-year-old democracy, but still there are, it has a long way to go still. Now, when one positive thing what Narendra Modi ji did was, after becoming Prime Minister in 2014, we know that he made his first maiden visit to Bhutan, and that was a welcome move, I think, by India to get close to Bhutan. So India, in fact, has to make these steps. In fact, in 2019 also, in fact, Prime Minister Modi also went to Bhutan, inaugurated the Supreme Court complex, and then you also find that he also inaugurated the the complex which has been built by the ISRO, to bring about weather forecasts in the far-flung areas in Bhutan. So these, as you know, that India also has given a South Asian satellite to the South Asian countries, which is in fact a very positive and a very a good move that has been done by India. So whether it is inauguration of the Supreme Court complex, or it is giving scholarships, or it is helping Bhutan, through its various hydropower projects, helping it in its 5-year plans. India has done a lot for Bhutan. I think it has gone a very long way in also helping Bhutan set up its democratic institutional framework. And I also would like to add that is one of the reasons that on the 114th National Day of Bhutan, Prime Minister Modi was given the highest civilian award by Bhutan. This is in fact a very important gesture that Bhutan did for India. And in fact, during the pandemic, Bhutan was also given 1.5 lakh vaccines, all free of cost, to Bhutan. So this was under the neighborhood first policy that, in fact, Bhutan did get that kind of a magnanimous, action, a move by the Modi government. So all said and done, I would like to say in the end that, you see, whether Bhutan in future will play the China card or not in India's relations is difficult to say at this juncture. Let's not forget, can you just move back to, there's a slide by Chanakya, right, the second or the third slide. Yeah, so there is some self-interest behind every friendship. There is no friendship without self-interest. This is the bitter truth. And this was said by Chanakya ages back, and I would like to end here. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Madhuri, for a wonderful and very comprehensive, authentic, I would say, most authoritative coverage of the issues concerning India and Bhutan relations. Before I open the house for question hour session, let me do my duty by welcoming you to FPRC and Foreign Policy School, and you very kindly agreed to spare time for our students, and I'm sure they must have benefited a lot. And now I ask my students to please come forward with your questions.
Yeah, hi.
Ma'am, am I audible as well as visible?
Yeah. Please carry on.
Thank you so much.
You'll have to speak loud a little, yes.
Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the session. I am Akriti Verma and I am pursuing my master's in international relations. Ma'am, I had a question for you that what like how the South Asia's geopolitics is evolving, as well as another question for you is that what elements, which despite these difficulties will keep these two countries united in the upcoming times or in the future?
You said between India and Bhutan,
yes.
What will keep it united?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, see, first of all, let me tell you that, India has to stop playing the big brother role. Number one, that is very, very important, because being magnanimous, being generous is one thing, but trying to interfere too much in the domestic politics of Bhutan, I think should not be, number one. Number two, I think when you talk of India-Bhutan relations, India and Bhutan are two countries which still have not settled their boundary disputes with China. And somewhere, I think India is interfering in the settlement of China and Bhutan's boundary disputes. Because if you see, right from the time of 1981 to 1984, whenever boundary talks were held between Bhutan and China, Indian representative was always there. So let's not forget that Bhutan is a sovereign country. It's an independent country. So India has to factor Bhutan in its policy with China. It cannot interfere, at least when boundary disputes are settled between China and Bhutan. Because you see, India is thoroughly concerned, because if the Doklim Plateau is given to China in lieu of those areas which I showed on the map, Jakarlang and Pasamlang regions, then India has a lot to lose. So this, in fact, strategically, boundary disputes, how they are settled between Bhutan and China will make a lot of difference to India. So this is one thing. Now, thirdly, let me also tell you, perhaps some of us know and some of us don't know, that there are only 3 countries which have their embassies in Bhutan. That is Bangladesh, India, and Kuwait. Other countries do not even have their embassies in Bhutan. Bhutan has been more of a protected country, and a very kind of a mystic isolationist countries. It doesn't even have, diplomatic relations with the P5, with the bigger, countries, the P5 countries, a permanent 5 of the UN Security Council. So, of course, that is Bhutan's internal matter. But where India and Bhutan can come in closer is India can help Bhutan to open up more with the world. And India can also help Bhutan to, to have some kind of a, media sustainability. When you talk about media in Bhutan, let me tell you that, it's the media in Bhutan is not able to sustain itself. Bhutan is a poor country. And they're just about, there is a Quinzel newspaper in Bhutan, which is government aided. Rest of the newspapers in Bhutan are all, kind of sinking. Either they open today, they close tomorrow. So as far as media management is concerned, I think India can really help Bhutan, because whatever all said and done, we have the Right to Information Act in India. We have the Whistleblowers Act. So these are important landmarks for India, which can actually help Bhutan. So this is how I thought I would, bring in your answer. Yeah.
Next question.
Yeah, next question, please.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yeah.
This is Akhilesh Trivedi, a doctoral student of Defense and Strategic Studies. After listening a nice presentation here, I have got a question here. What are the future challenges for the partnership in the perspective of a transforming domestic, regional, and worldwide environment?
Challenges between whom are you talking about?
Ma'am, India and Bhutan, basically.
Okay. You see, challenges, as I've said, between India and Bhutan, like I was telling Akriti also, one is the boundary factor. You see, which again, I'm going to emphasize that India should leave Bhutan alone when it settles its boundary disputes with China. Because if it interferes too much, this relationship, which is so much nurtured, will somewhere stand to lose. This is my belief. Of course, people can have different interpretations for it. This is number one. Number two, where I think Bhutan and India are having a few problems is that politically everything seems okay. Bureaucratically, everything seems okay. But civil society relationship between India and Bhutan is at a low key. Why do I say that? Because the youth in Bhutan, the younger generation in Bhutan are very, very, disturbed when they see that India interferes too much in Bhutan's domestic politics. When I told you what happened in 2003 and Bhutan, India withdrew subsidies from Bhutan on cooking gas, on kerosene. So these were not taken kindly, by Bhutan. A third thing I would also like to tell you is also that when you talk about the Freedom House Index in Bhutan, out of 7, Bhutan is standing at about 3.2. So it's somewhere in between. The Freedom House Index says that Bhutan's position in the Freedom House Index is 3.2, which means that still Bhutan has a long way to go. And why do I say that? Trade unions are not encouraged in Bhutan. Pressure groups are not encouraged in Bhutan. Civil society organizations are not encouraged in Bhutan. This is where India can help Bhutan to, open up more to the world, to build up more on its civil society. And once Bhutan opens up more to the world, becomes more pluralistic, becomes more, gives more importance to its freedoms, democratically, India and Bhutan can get closer. Because today, Bhutan is a 15-year-old democracy. India is a 75-year-old democracy. So both these countries can gain a lot from each other. It's not that everything India is only teaching to Bhutan. Bhutan also, has something to offer to the world through its gross national happiness. This gross national happiness, as I said, you'll also be surprised that every few years, there is a gross national happiness survey that takes place in Bhutan, where people say how happy or how not happy they are. And, during one of my visits in Bhutan, when I was just interviewing a couple of villagers, then I asked them, I said that, why don't you grow more paddy there? I said, because, this will make you more comfortable in your finances. They said, no, we are happy the way we are. If I grow more paddy, I double my paddy production, I will not be able to play archery, their sport that they love. So this is what I'm trying to say, that this gross national happiness is something which India has to learn from, which the world has to learn from. Even United Nations actually had given a lot of importance, to this gross national happiness, when I remember what was said by Ban Ki-moon in one of his, speeches at the United Nations. Yeah, so that's what I'd like to say.
So can we say, like, is it India, as you mentioned, like India is a big brother, posing as a big brother. So can we say, like, India is putting pressure on Bhutan in this relationship?
Yes, definitely, definitely. Modi ji did try to make amends somewhere, but let me tell you that there is a very important article in the Wire. I'm forgetting the author, maybe Swati Chawla. She had then said that when Nehru was trying to talk about, the princely states, their representation in the Constituent Assembly, because India, had 560 princely states, and how they were going to be represented in the Constituent Assembly. Nehru also then had his eyes on Bhutan and said that Bhutan also perhaps can be negotiated into joining the Indian Union. So from then on, there were indirect moves, there were indirect designs, but this was conveyed by Bhutan that time only, that Bhutan's culture is more closer to Tibet, more closer to China than it is to India. So this big brother role India will have to play very cautiously. And here I would like to tell you also that this BBIN agreement that is there, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal motor vehicle agreement that is there in these countries, and they're trying to establish economic corridor for these countries, a road corridor. I think India can play a bigger role in that, in that particular move. And then you also have other organizations like SAARC and BIMSTEC. India needs to be more generous towards Bhutan. Why I'm particularly saying it is that China is trying to, pounce on all the neighbors, whether it's Sri Lanka through the Hambantota port that they have, whether it's Myanmar through the Kyaku port. It's bringing, it's exploiting the needs of India's neighbors. Bhutan is only one country which has not joined the BRI. Other countries have all joined the BRI, which are India's neighbors. So India needs to play its role very cautiously. That's what.
Thank you.
Yeah. Then next question. Or
Good
Yeah,
evening,
yeah,
ma'am.
go.
Am I
Yeah,
audible?
good evening. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Please carry on.
First of all, thank you for such insightful session on Indo-Bhutan relations. I am Anushka Sharma, a final year mass media student from Jain College, Mumbai. So my question is based on your presentation only. It's like how the Chinese influence is growing on Bhutan. So what do you think will be the course of action if PLA crosses the red lines in Bhutan? So what do you think the monarch of the Bhutan will do? Like, will they invite assistance from India, or when like India will play the big brother role, or what will happen there?
You, Anushka?
Sharma.
Anushka Sharma. Anushka, let me tell you, yours is a very hypothetical question. Okay, so but anyway, I'll try and answer. I can't say what will happen in future, but if such a tendency arises, and you say that the PLA crosses, let's not forget, Anushka, that the PLA, or there are soldiers without uniforms already in Bhutan. You see, if you see cross-border settlement, which I talked about in my presentation in the Menchuma Valley, they're already there. There are about 50 households where you have soldiers without uniforms. They're already there. In the Doklim area, they are already there. Now, Bhutan, if it seeks help from India, you see, to counter these PLA forces, it can backfire for Bhutan also, because Bhutan will not like to face the wrath of such a big neighbor, of such a powerful neighbor. So I think what Bhutan will do, will try to play its cards very diplomatically. Bhutan would like to, I think, politically assert itself, no doubt. Why would it like Chinese PLA soldiers to enter the area? But whatever it does, I think it will have to play in very diplomatically. It cannot afford to lose India also, and it cannot afford to anger China also. So it's caught in between. It's sandwiched between both the neighbors. So I think only a diplomatic angle will help Bhutan solve such a crisis if it occurs.
Yes, any other question? Or should I move forward?
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, sure. Please
Be brief.
Yeah. So just one question, like how about the Indian army, like in Bhutanese territory. So there are news reports about how the Bhutanese youth is like not happy with them. So what do you think? Like, what's your opinion on that?
See, if the Bhutanese youth are not happy, you see, let me tell you, the king is one person. It's a small country of 8 lakhs people only. 8 lakhs, you can have, a small Varshi area in Navi Mumbai could be 8 lakhs. So this is how, small a country is Bhutan. So the king is one person who gels with the youth. He's a young person himself. The young, vibrant, handsome king that they have is very, very close to the youth of Bhutan, and plays archery with them, plays football with them. And if the youth of Bhutan are unhappy, I think the king somewhere will have to give them a hearing. And this might factor in the king's policies towards, towards India, towards, the Indian policies that are made. But all said and done, the youth is an important part, but it is not everything in Bhutan. Bhutan also is a very traditionally cultural country, and whatever the king is doing, whatever policies he's making along with the constitutional setup that is there, has to be for the welfare of the country. It's not only going to be for the welfare of the youth. It has to be for the welfare of the country. That is what I would like to say.
Thank you, Dr. Madhuri. Before I close this session, as I do usually, I put myself in the role of a student and ask questions.
Why not, sir?
There are two issues that come to my mind when we talk about India and Bhutan relations. This is a perception. One may agree, one may not agree. Okay. One is that there is a aspiration on the part of Bhutan for a higher profile in international relations. And that's why Bhutan is now opening up, signing agreements, economic agreements and other trade agreements with Japan, Germany and all that. So there was a time when I think India was the only avenue, only alternative for Bhutan for everything. But now there is a change perception. India first, but India not alone. This seems to be a little, disquieting from Indian point of view. And the second issue is there is economic stagnation in Bhutan in recent years, maybe because of this pandemic and all that. And we are doing what we can do for the upliftment of Bhutan's economy, and we are doing our best. But China is giving better opportunities. Unemployment is there. Youth is not very happy about their current status and all that. And the Chinese, deliberately they are providing scholarship, and they just tempt them with better, prospects if they continue to have relations with China and all that. So how do you look at these two things?
Number one, you're quite right in that sense that Bhutan has expanded its, interaction with other countries. Let me give you one example. You talked about Japan. I think Australia is also another very important example. What Bhutan has is non-formal diplomatic relations. You see, initially, all the, Bhutanese young scholars would come to India. It is not anymore that. And many of them actually go to Australia now. So this is a shift that is happening, that because Bhutan is opening up to the world, of course, not in such a big way, not in such a quick way. In fact, the students are encouraged now to go to other countries to study. This is one. Secondly, also Bhutan is signing agreements with other countries, which is also a positive thing for Bhutan. But you see, India cannot control Bhutan for eternity. It has to move out. I mean, whatever, it has to spread its wings, and that is what Bhutan is doing. I'll give you a small example. You have the Druk Airways in Bhutan. Initially, the flight used to be from Paro to Delhi, from Thimphu to Delhi, or Thimphu to Bagdogra. Now what do you have? Now the Druk Airways is flying from Paro to Thailand, from Paro to Australia. So this network expansion of even the airways. So all this goes to prove that I think Bhutan is trying to make a place in the world for itself. In a small way, it is trying to make, and I think it's a matter of time before Bhutan also will start having diplomatic relations with more countries. Today, it has diplomatic relations with 54 countries, not with all the countries. And there are good reasons why it doesn't have diplomatic relations with all the countries. Secondly, I think you talked about China. You say China is a force to reckon with. Let's not forget that when you talk about China, the necessary economic opening China can give in hydroelectric power to Bhutan, because India is charging, high loans, interest on loans. Bhutan is deeply in debt. This is one factor India has to keep in mind. Second, there is high unemployment rate in Bhutan today, and China is investing a lot in Bhutan in terms of establishing industries, in terms of economics. So this is where Bhutan is gaining, you see, because every other country has, been captured as a debt trap policy of China. Bhutan is one country which is slowly entering it, but it has entered. It definitely has entered. And this is where I think Bhutan and India need to get closer. Otherwise, China also very soon will be a part of the debt trap policy of China. China is trying to bring about that with Bhutan.
Thank you, Dr. Madhuri, for this wonderful session and helping our students to understand the various aspects of this bilateral relations. Is very important relationship from a strategic and other point of view. And I once again thank you for having accepted our invite and sparing time. We hope to have your guidance and the benefit of your views in future also. Thank you.
I look forward. Thank you. Thank you, sir. And thank you to all the students. It was a pleasure being with all of you. And I like your intelligent questions. Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
So with your permission, now I close the session.
Right, sir. Right, sir. Thank you.